We're back. Welcome back to Modern Mondays on Fridays at Guardian Games.
Yeah, we're here broadcasting competitive modern F&M at Guardian Games. If you're familiar with us, we've been streaming for several years, but we took a little bit of hiatus because, some stuff happened the past few years, except now we're back and ready to start watching some more Magic. Tonight's kind of a test stream. We've got some new equipment running, kind of ironing out some glitches, so feel free to let us know in chat if you notice something that's off. But yeah, hopefully by the end of the stream today, we'll be back to normal, and then we're going to be streaming pretty much every Monday for the foreseeable future until the next global catastrophe happens.
And I'm not even going to try and predict when that'll happen because I have not been very good at that in the past. So let's say hi to our match here. We have.
Looks like we have Andrew Nickel playing Blue Steel, which is sort of like an 8-cast artifact deck, playing against Michael Handcuff on Izzet Murktide. Should be a pretty interesting. Ooh, that's a. Oh, maybe it's spirit. That's a spirit. That's not an artifact.
Does appear to be spirit. We'll see what the next play is, but it's very possible that Blue Steel is okay. This is like the what's the artificer that. This is Blue Steel. I can tell from some of the other cards in the hand. They're artifact casting cost reducers, so I do believe in the Blue Steel here.
Okay, maybe this is when I think Blue Steel, I'm like, oh, this is going to be like 8 casts, but I think we might have something slightly different going on. And it looks like Michael's on Izzet Murktide, which is going to be a deck everyone's probably familiar with, packed full of removal and cheap threats. Mausoleum Wanderer down.
Michael's been very patient with this bauble. What do you think is the reasoning for the patience with the bauble here?
Might be waiting for a fetch land. Maybe had some removal that he wanted to not have to pay life for and to get some lands into play, like the Spire Bluff Canals. So if you have multiple of those in your hand, so it might not need any extra cards right now. And doesn't need Delirium currently for Darcy. So no real reason to crack that unless you need an answer to something.
Andrew has played an artifact cost reducer that has a name. I want to say it's like a 1/3.
Boy, this is a good first match for us to sort of get back into the ring here.
Get tossed into the Blue Steel mindset.
I thought we were going to be playing like Thought Monitors and Thoughtcast and Ornithopters and Mimnites, and I can recognize almost any printing of those. But Ethereum Sculptor, chat says.
There we go. Thanks, chat. Yeah, I believe Chillith. Getting busy with the sculptor. Yeah.
All right, we do finally crack that bauble. And we got a counterspell. And looks like Andrew's playing a Treasure Vault and a Smuggler's Copter. Man, it's been a while since I've seen one of those. Right, we've got a Dash Ragavan. Michael knowing that the Copter cannot be currently crewed. Looks like we have a Reader on a Dash Ragavan. And it feels like, a lot of people don't play MTGO. Stuff is just opening up right now. Folks are coming back with their paper decks. And as much as Ragavan's such a ubiquitous card since Modern Horizons 2 came out, if you haven't been playing paper Magic for a while, you're going to see a lot of new cards here.
And it looks like maybe our life totals are swapped. This is unfortunately a larger issue. Travis is going to go take a look at it. There we go. All right, Ragavan rumbles in, hits for 2, and we flip a Thought Monitor and a Treasure. Michael will not be casting that this turn. And back to hand. All right. I'm surprised that the Ethereum Sculptor has stayed on the battlefield for this long.
Oh, let's see. I think there's another counter spell. It's sort of hard to see exactly what's on Michael's hand. Holding it kind of close to the chest, but I would guess there's not a 1-mana removal for it currently. Usually Murktide's playing 8 1-mana removal effects, sometimes 7. It's between 3 or 4 bolts and 4 Unholy Heats.
Okay, there we are. So it looks like Michael has kind of chosen to get rid of the payoffs over the enablers so far, getting the choice between removing the Sculptor from the board and waiting until combat to get rid of the Copter.
All right, looks like we have is that a Grand? Oh boy, this is really
Grand Architect.
Grand Architect is what I was thinking that was. And an Oboro. And a turn pass after that. All right, looks like we have plenty of bolts. One takes care of the Grand Architect, and then we're going to see that Dash Ragavan again. Not a lot that Mono Blue can do to interact with a Dash Ragavan on 1 mana. And does Michael want his Mishra's Baubles reduced in cost? And looks like we're just going to use the treasure to play a Darcy. And let's see, we currently don't have Delirium in Michael's graveyard. Curious what the big mana payoff is going to be in this blue steel deck. It's been a while since I played against it. I remember several years ago it sort of like was one of those budget decks that crept up and was like slightly competitive for a minute, and still, you know, I feel like the difference between tier 1 and tier like 2.5 or 3 isn't always that great in Modern. All decks that have strong synergies can't do well. It's just been a long time since I've seen this deck. Looks like chat's saying Walking Ballista. That makes a lot of sense. The infinite mana combo.
With some old school Kamigawa lands come into play. We have Oboro and Minomo.
That's just when you're flexing with your mono-colored deck that, like, yeah, I can have expensive lands too.
Yeah. Oboro's getting up there. It's like $80.
Oh. All right, looks like we're going to want to use all of our mana here. We fetch and shock on Michael's side. Interesting to fetch and shock before iteration. The thinning the deck by one land I don't think is really going to make any significant difference. Yeah, it's curious that ordering. Probably not a big deal.
Definitely going to have to find something imminently castable off of iteration to make this worth it. Can't kind of go the standard route of exile land, play the land, so maybe looking for a removal spell here. Or have we not played a land yet this turn? Okay.
Looks like Michael has a lot of alt art cards hanging out in this Murktide deck. There's a lot of different versions of cards these days. Like boomer moments in the booth here. Yeah, Obaro filtering blue lands when you're playing lots of colorless lands is actually a pretty important thing that can happen, and not. I mean, it seems like a corner case scenario, but when you're playing cards that have 2 blue pips in them, I know that's the reason why sometimes Merfolk has played that card, and just being able to use that as your land drop to make 2 blue gets you out of some situations where you wouldn't have a play otherwise.
That's cool. So it looks like there's another Grand Architect in hand for Andrew.
Right, cost 1 less. And I figure that's why you make sure you have 2 mana up.
And there's the counter spell. And then we're going to empty the hand with the Architect.
Is that our third? I think that's our 3rd Architect that we've seen this game so far. Is that correct? Maybe a second.
Architect's great, but we are in. If you're on Andrew's side, you're still kind of in a board position where you're no cards in hand. You've got kind of the enablers, but no payoffs here.
I would imagine blue still if you're playing Treasure Vault. It seems like you could play Urza's Saga with some fairly low cost. I would imagine that's in the deck. And this Dragon's Rage Chandler continuing to do its best Delver impersonation and getting in again. It looks like we're going to have a pretty big Murktide here. And you can threaten lethal with making it a 7/7 instead of an 8/8. But it looks like we're going to go full 8/8 here. Just some things to slightly maybe nitpick at is there is no reason to make it an 8/8. If you're playing against like mono blue, I'd assume they're playing bounce effects. So you're just maybe insulating yourself to be able to play it again and still use some of those sorceries in the yard. But I doubt it's going to matter because I don't see a real way that Andrew can get a big enough board here to deal with both Murktide, a couple hits Darcy, and a Ragavan. But let's see what happens.
Right, I suppose even if it was... Okay, so... I mean, we've got a blocker, but...
A chump block and filter. Are you... You could try to block the Darcy to get a permanent off the board.
But if we swing with Ragavan, then that's lethal. So as long as Michael swings with everything, it forces the chump.
All right, if Michael has a removal spell, that is definitely game over.
We're going to get the block. We're going to loot something straight to the yard. Ooh, okay.
That's a nice play there. Pick up a land, loot the land away. Andrew was already flooded. It's a smart play to play to some outs.
Yeah, very heads up by Andrew.
This is sort of throwing off my week. I'm used to streaming on Monday, and okay, Michael flips over a Smuggler's Copter, and no reason not to play that. A another evasive threat. Yeah, it looks like that's going to be game here. So blue-red doing what blue-red does, deploying some threats, using some counter spells and removal, and winning the game.
Classic blue-red. So we didn't really get to see Andrew's payoffs. Does anybody in chat know blue-steel well enough to know what some of the payoffs might be for Andrew's deck? Are we going like Karn the Great Creator, Sundering Titans? Like what are we playing towards? Worm Coil Engines?
Yeah, it looks like it's sort of trying to play an aggro game plan here. Yeah, I'd be curious what the mana curve looks like, how many large payoff cards it has, if there's a way to search for them. It's kind of cool that we get to see, I mean, I feel like most modern matches these days are pretty interesting, fun, interactive, and there's a lot of viable decks out there, but blue steel wasn't something that was on my radar that we'd see tonight. So it's interesting to see a deck that I actually don't know everything that's in it. It feels like if you play a lot of Modern, or if you watch a lot of Modern and read MTGO results, you can kind of know what your opponent's playing down to maybe like 4 to 8 cards if you pay pretty close attention to the metagame. And there is a real advantage to playing an off-meta deck when your opponent might not really know how to sideboard for you, except for like, oh, cards that are good against artifacts.
This does seem like, depending on how this version of blue steel is constructed, it is going to be tough to play against the all removal spell and counter magic Izzet Murktide deck. This doesn't feel like the matchup that blue steel is looking to face. With not a lot of like ETB effects to gain value, they kind of have to assemble some sort of board to actually gain advantage. And Murktide does a pretty good job of keeping that from happening.
Yeah, Murktide is such an efficient deck. All of the cards are really impactful. Their threats are evasive or generate value, and their card advantage, usually playing 1 to 3 Archmage's Charms and 4 Expressive Iterations, also are really just versatile cards. So it's kind of the closest I've felt in Modern to playing a Legacy deck in terms of how the deck actually plays. And can't see a lot of what was in Andrew's sideboard. I saw some Sorcerer's Spyglass, Damping Sphere.
It's Lodestone Golems.
Yeah. Right, so maybe trying to do some taxing type effects. And when I think of Lodestone Golem, I think of Vintage.
That is kind of where it made its name.
All right, I'm very curious to see some spicy sideboard cards. I'm excited to see what's going to happen. It does feel like in this matchup, Ragavan is particularly strong. Being able to get you up on mana it feels really good when you're playing a deck with Ragavan and you're facing a deck that doesn't play red for lightning bolts or heats, and also isn't playing a lot of Mim Knights are like 1-drop humans or elves or something. When you're playing a deck that has to have a certain amount of board presence to then sort of spam the rest of your hand, that's where Ragavan can really shine. It's going to be a little bit harder being on the draw, and you don't always have it in your opener, but I imagine those are still in the deck.
I did see one of my favorite cards as we were kind of watching Andrew's sideboard, and that's Throne of the God Pharaoh, which I forgot is also a great way to win the game with this deck. Although, again, going to be somewhat difficult to keep these permanents on the board to tap with against Michael.
This deck is taking me back to like a standard, like from 5 or 6 years ago, where I remember these cards being played. All right, we're getting a workout here with this shuffling. Have you ever played a Urian deck, Ian?
Not in paper.
Okay.
No, and I don't ever plan to. But I've heard that it is quite a thing to shuffle.
All right. Game number 2 here. It looks like I saw the Lodestone Golems in Andrew's deck when we're just looking at the shuffling happening. So that slows down this sort of like it's not quite Turbo Xerox, but close to it, of Izzet Murktide.
The thing that I didn't see in sideboarding that probably would be the biggest help to Andrew is I hope he's playing like a bunch of relic style effects. Because being able to at least keep the Murktides and Darcy's down, I think, is going to be a big part of this matchup.
Yeah, just Relic is really good. It takes some heads up play, because if a Murktide resolves, drawing a Relic is pretty bad. But to be able to, if you can get one out early and to manage your opponent's graveyard and really like figure out the math on how to use Relic, is, you know, it takes some smart play, but can really slow down the blue-red deck. And if they're dependent on Darcy's or Heats being full Delirium, it gets tricky to play around.
So I do see a Lodestone Golem in Andrew's hand. So at least one of those.
I know I've had it played against me in Modern. I think maybe it was years ago and some kind of like mono blue Tron thing going on, but I would love to see a Lodestone Golem get resolved. All right, looks like Michael's a reader. Is that Judge's Familiar? I think it is. I think it's a promo art of Judge's Familiar.
I believe that.
So 1 mana flyer that you can sack it to sort of force spike a non-creature spell. And looks like we got 2 baubles for Michael. Sack it out of spite. All right. Got communication going on the table. We're going to draw off both those baubles. Sun Iterations picked up, and a counter spell.
Oh boy.
Oh,
Andrew stuck on one.
Oh, I was really hoping for the Lodestone Golem, but
it's a long way to go.
yeah. All right. Ooh, it looks like both players are stuck on 1 land. I will say Michael's probably going to be able to pull out of that a little bit quicker, being able to like use Bolt on upkeep to sort of filter your draws to make sure you hit land drops. Looks like there is a Bolt in Michael's hand, but we did hit land number 2 for Andrew.
I believe Smuggler's Copter, another Judge's Familiar among the options. Looks like the Familiar's up front.
Oh.
Nope. Okay.
All right, Chief Engineer. And Michael just pulls the land off the top without bolting to filter there with Dragon's Rage Chandler. Michael's got a lot of removal here. I see a Bolt, I see a Heat. There's also a Counter Spell. We're going for a Heat on the Mausoleum Wanderer. All right, looks like I was sacked out of spite. And passing back, okay. So with Convoke, we're going to be able to get a 3-drop out if we want it.
Could also potentially go Smuggler's Copter, or maybe play Judge's Familiar and then tap both creatures into Smuggler's Copter. And then maybe, I don't know if we've got something else in hand that costs 1 here. Okay, so we see the Judge's Familiar. Okay, this makes sense. Play the Copter, and we still have the Engineer available to crew the Copter. And Judge's Familiar's hanging out, able to potentially counter something like an might have been able to counter an Expressive Iteration before the land drop.
And it looks like, there is a counter spell in Michael's hand, but we potentially can cast the Lodestone Golem next turn. Michael seems to value having that counter spell, and I think there is a bolt, so it's just a really kind of commanding position to be in, to have removal plus counter spell up at this point, and then each one of those spells that you're casting, you're going to get to take a look at the top of your deck and see if you want to keep that there. Surveil, incredibly strong mechanic. Oh, 6-drop. Going 4 mana for a Lodestone Golem. I would wager that eats a counter spell. And it does. Surveil trigger. It's always slightly disheartening when your opponent surveils and leaves something on the top.
Yeah. Especially when they're countering your payoff.
Ooh. Do we want to get an attack in here? Looks like we're willing to trade, but I think it's just going to eat a lightning bolt, so this is kind of perfect for Michael.
Actually, I don't think that Darcy has Delirium, as we didn't see it attack last turn, and I don't think we got a new type in Yard.
Okay. Looks like Michael did let Andrew loot instead of bolting before combat.
So, Mike, they're kind of discussing here whether the Surveil is going to happen. Andrew, of course, has the Judge's Familiar available to sacrifice to counter this bolt, and I think it makes a lot of sense to do so at this point.
All right, looks like an iteration. Let's see if there's any good cards on the top 4. Looks like there is at least one good card in the top 3. Oh, nope, look, surveilled away.
At this point, if you're Michael, I mean, you can speak to this having played the deck, but I assume you're looking for something like a Murktide Regent to just toss out your biggest possible threat and then close out the game from there.
Yeah, another counterspell is pretty good. You only play 4 counterspells. You have a couple charms in the deck. Removal seems pretty strong in this situation. So you've got an evasive threat now. A Murktide's nice, but I'd almost rather... I kind of want to have a piece of interaction or a counterspell, and then Murktide. It's a very, very full-looking graveyard. Land, yeah, we have Delirium now. Nope, we don't. Do we not? I guess we just got Artifact, Land, Sorcery, Instant. That should be Delirium. I'm gonna go make sure that those players know what's up here.
All right, Travis is on the case. We're double checking. And we are realizing that yes, in fact, we do have delirium. We'll correct the damage, and off we go.
I do feel like a bit of a superhero because I get to throw on a mask every time I run outside to correct something.
Just swoop in. Swoop in to make sure correct damage is dealt. Alright, we're going to serve with old Smugs again, and we're going to get the loot effect.
Yeah. Feels good when you get the loot effect. Like, I didn't use removal yet, so at least something's going to happen. All right.
Toss is the architect.
Wow.
So
I'm pretty surprised that Michael didn't have. There's a lot of removal in the deck.
I wonder if Michael really wanted to hold up a counterspell or something and felt like didn't want to let Andrew just slam. But we do not slam from Andrew's side. Representing something like a Spell Pierce, maybe, if we're Andrew.
We've got Metallic Rebuke up too.
I think we need another artifact to be able to rebuke.
1, 2. Oh yeah, we just have 2, right? Because that's the chief engineer is an artificer, but not an artifact.
Right. But it looks like Andrew does have a Thought Monitor in hand. Which, if he can resolve that, that is kind of one of the real sources of card advantage for this blue steel deck.
Andrew probably just wanted to look at how cool that version of Archmage's Charm was. old bordered foil.
Yeah, Michael has a beautiful deck for sure.
Looks like we've exiled the Consider. Did not see what got put to hand. Right. Like the card on top. And then Michael is getting a little bit low on life here. Gotta send in with the Darcy.
It's one of those very few moments where it actually can feel detrimental to have Darcy have that have to attack text.
It would be a little too good if you got to choose just to stay back on blockers. Some people think it's already too good.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, it looks like we have a Golem and
there's a Thought Monitor,
which is interesting. One of these is going to get countered, and it looks like Michael telegraphed the counter spell with Shocking and that Steam Vents. And I don't think that would be a bluff when you're at such low life. So you're either thinking that's 2 1-mana removal spells or a counter spell at this point. So it's sort of like I think Andrew might be able to. See, 1, 2. We don't have a lot of artifacts out there, so
no. Yeah, I think you got to run the Golem into the counterspell and hope to resolve the Thought Monitor next turn.
So it's going to cost 1 less. So it'll cost 3. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. The Golem will cost 3, and Andrew could tap creatures to make it cost even less than that. But I imagine since we can't double spell anyway. Might as well just it's
like chat says swinging first might be a good idea. I could see that. You also get a loot too.
Just trying to see the math for Thought Monitor. So if we swing, then Thought Monitor, I don't think is... Okay, might be an option now then. Yeah, I think we could still cast it if we swing here. Oh no, we'd be able to cast it anyway because it's going to be 4.
If the copter dies and you have 1 tapped, you could still cast Thought Monitor. So it looks... all right. Get on to copter. I miss the copter jokes from Standard. That was...
I don't miss them. But, have your fun.
Thanks. 6 is getting down there. It is interesting when you're playing against a deck that does not have red in it. It gets... You can go pretty low without having to worry about like a bolt or even a dashed threat most of the time. Most of those dash cards are going to be in red.
Honestly, Andrew has demonstrated just an immense amount of patience this game, not casting into open mana.
That's going to make things tricky. I mean, it's hard to say really because it's smart, I guess, not playing in a counterspell unless you can double spell a turn. Then you are just letting Andrew draw more cards that are impactful and still hold up counterspell while maybe having more open mana. So it's hard. I don't know the full context of Andrew's hand, but attacking with the copter now is gonna be a bit of an issue.
Yeah, and just straight up dead on the crackback, unless this Thought Monitor can land and we can have a chump blocker. I mean, I think just Michael's threats just outsize Andrew's by such a significant margin. It's a very tough situation to be in if you're Andrew.
Well, you've got some chump blockers for flyers. Blink Moths can sacrifice themselves to stand up to a dragon. Seemed pretty on flavor, a dragon sort of coming over and icing for Pyrexia.
So I think Andrew really has to decide here, do we think Michael is on 2 counter spells? And it looks like now's go time. So we're gonna start with the Lodestone Golem, run that into the first piece of counter magic.
Okay, don't need another land. I think Michael's good with 6. And
yeah, it does feel like if this was the play, maybe we just wanted to try and slam last turn. Because I don't think we can play Thought Monitor here. So we're still unable to double spell. Oh no, we are able to double spell.
Yeah, you got the cost reduction with
the
Architect.
Right. Excuse me.
All right, double spell into double counter spell.
Okay, so unfortunately this is game then because Andrew has no way to crew the copter and Michael has lethal on the crackback here.
You're good at math there. You got 8 plus 3.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Chilla's keeping me honest with my
get a fist bump. There you go.
Blue steel math.
All right. Well, interesting deck to see. It's always fun when you don't know everything that's going to be in your opponent's deck. It seems I could see how blue steel would be good against some of the slower control-y pile decks, because when you're having those creatures that are tax, like you sack to tax stuff, like it makes resolving planeswalkers harder, and also it doesn't really give a ton of value with the evoke elementals. But you're not. Also, it seems tricky to build up a board presence. I 8 cast seems to do a similar thing, except instead of having cost reducers, it's just making everything cheaper with affinity.
Synergy based decks are just kind of like, they're the most, in my opinion, they're the most fun, but yeah, you do get stuck in these situations where you have a bunch of pieces that individually just aren't really powerful enough. And Modern has really kind of showcased that in recent set releases, that your cards need to have a lot of effects beyond just being a synergy piece.
Yeah, I was just having this conversation. We're talking about slivers, and with the additional rainbow land for creature decks, that someone was mentioning how like slivers might be great right now, but I think it's really hard to play creature based synergy decks that don't have a card like Noble Hierarch or something that's going to like be generating you mana. Or affinity is similar to that, where just by playing your cards, you're able to play other cards for a cheaper cost, if not free. And when you're actually having to pay mana for cards, more than one mana for cards that are then going to reduce more expensive cards, you're just like CMC has to creep higher, that the efficiency of a lot of Modern decks is going to kind of outclass that.
And I mean, one of the big things that Affinity's doing is being one of the best, if not the best, Urza Saga deck in the format. And I don't think that can be understated, that being the best Saga deck is a good place to be in Modern right now.
Yeah, Saga, very powerful card. Looks like Andrew is not playing with Sagas. Curious if that would fit into the deck, or maybe there's not enough ones that Andrew wants to be playing that synergize with the game plan. Interesting matchup. Cool to see. Nice looking decks. And looks like we have about 7.5 minutes left in round. Not quite enough time to run another match through here. So we've got tonight, we're doing 4 rounds of Modern. Sort of picked a random match to start off round 1, but the next rounds are going to be the folks that are winning, and then our final match will be table number 1, and we'll be here. We'll go to break right now, but we'll be back in about 7 minutes.